So, good evening, hello, hi. This is Meta Programs 2. Meta Programs 2 is where we are going to go into eliciting meta programs. And when you elicit things in NLP, basically that means you ask questions in order to gather information. Taking sales, influencing and persuasion as an example, if I were to say to you, what are you looking for? Then I'm eliciting visual information. If I ask you, what will it sound like when you're satisfied? Then I'm eliciting auditory information. If I ask you, how will you feel when you have achieved your goal? Then I'm eliciting kinesthetic information. What does the sweet smell of success taste like is gustatory and olfactory. Olfactory and gustatory, get it the right way around. So by the way that you ask questions, you are automatically keying into a particular person's sorting patterns. So if I were to ask you, so what's important? Then I'm asking you a non-sensory, not nonsense, but non-sensory based question. So generally when you start a listing, you want to ask a big picture question that is non-sensory specific. So you're not, unless you want to lead the witness, but if you're just wanting to gather information impartially, then you want to ask what's important or what do you want, which are non-sensory specific. If I ask what do you want, I'm presupposing the future. Because it's highly unlikely that you will want something in the past. Although some people phrase their desires in terms of what they had before. For example, I want to be the same weight as I was when I was 18. Which is asking for something in the past. So that would be someone who's sorting for the past. So when you say what do you want, you're automatically presupposing something in the future. Just by the way that you ask the question. What's happening would be presupposing things that are happening in the moment. So this is how you use meta-program sorts to ask, to structure the questions that you're going to ask. So if you ask in a sales context, so what are you after? As a result of that question, say what are you after in your career? People might say, well, I want to have something that's fulfilling. I need to have 5 days a week. I must have the Wednesdays afternoons off after 4 o'clock, and it would be really nice to have a car. So they are meta-program sorts. If I were to ask you alternatively, so what do you need? Then I'm being specific as to which modal operator I'm eliciting, or what should you do. And the other thing about these meta-programs is that even if someone says to you, oh, I should do this, if you play it back to them, so you should do this, it doesn't necessarily have the same impact going in as it does coming out. So sometimes, even though someone has just said, I should do this, and you play it back to them, so you should do this, you'll get a response that's kind of antagonistic or confrontational, even though they're the exact words that they said. Does that make sense? So when you're listing, especially when you first start, you want to start with a big picture and be as general as possible in the questions that you use. Because so in a sales context, if I would say to you, so you want to be the operations manager for a water treatment plant in Ford with a 37.5-hour shift pattern, that's very specific, and that would be a very specific person that you're looking for. Whereas if you go, okay, so you're after a new job, that would be much more general and would enable the person to then process through their own meta-programs rather than you guiding them through something very specific. So those of you who have a tendency to be very specific, you can learn how to be more general. Those of you who have a tendency to be very general can learn how to ask very specific questions as you drill down to get more information. Because ultimately the representation that you're after will be a specific instance or event in time rather than a generalised pattern. So if, for example, you're listing what you like when you're really confident, you want a specific instance of that confidence in with a specific where, when, how, what, why and who associated with it. Otherwise people don't necessarily generalise from I'm confident in the shower to I'm confident when I'm at an interview. And a lot more people can be confident singing in the shower than they can be confident at an interview or confident when they step up to do public speaking, for example. That's where you get much more specific in your elicitation as you start to drill down from big picture down to specific details. So when you start with what's important, you're listing pretty well the biggest chunk, which is values. In the States they go, what's up? Which is a very general statement. And in the States, what's up, it just kind of means what's happening. Whereas in the UK, what's up means like there's something wrong. So it's not, it doesn't translate that well from American into English. How's things, or how are you, how's it going? They're sort of quite general statements that you can use if you want to be objective. Obviously if you're leading, that's a totally different thing. Then you'll lead them through the sequence of meta programs that you want to take them through in order to get them to a certain point. So if your goal is to get them to a point where they go, yes, that's for me, then you want to chunk all the meta program thoughts such that they take the person to that very specific point. So you might start out with, so what's important, so what do you want, so where do you want it, so when do you want it, so you got it now. So you're taking them through a series of steps in order to get them to the point where you're leading them to. That's different to just a general elicitation of, so how is it, how's it going, what's happened. Excuse me. You could also ask them questions about whether their point of reference is themselves. So what will you notice when you have your goal? You can take a point of reference that is someone external to them. So what will someone looking at you see? She's looking from a different perspective. So what will you see and what will someone looking at you see? One is self, the other is other. So you change it in the reference. And the third point you could ask from is, so if someone was observing you, what would they notice? Which would be like an observer position. So that's what we're going to get into tonight, is we're going to do some exercises to elicit using your own meta programs to find out how that works, and then to elicit using the other person's meta programs and to notice the difference between the two. So a lot of people elicit using their own meta programs, and then when they get stuck, they blame it on this person's being unresponsive, or this person isn't listening to what I'm saying. And generally it means that the person who's speaking hasn't had the flexibility to change to suit the patterns of the listener. They want the listener to change to suit their patterns. And if you find yourself having to change clients, let's use Van as metaphor, that's probably an indication that your meta programs are a bit too rigid. You can soften them and make them more fluid. So that's what we're going to do this evening.